All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Connected Podcast, where we talk to entrepreneurs who know a thing or two about networking. And today I have with me Charisse Williams, the author of The Joy of Thriving While Black, and also a life coach and executive coach and nonprofit executive leader. Just someone who I have been very fond of and over the years, and a big fan. So welcome to the Connected Podcast, Reese.
Thanks so much for having me, Ray.
Cool. So I want to kind of dive into, because that's such a awesome title, "The Joy of Thriving While Black." How did you come up with that? What's the impetus for that book?
Yeah, so I should start by saying I began my full-time leadership coaching business in January of 2020.
Okay.
So, like any entrepreneur who's building something, I had to focus on all the things, right? Branding myself, figuring out my niche, just really figuring out the best way to match my background and my skills with my ideal customer, right? So I'm doing that. I'm chugging along, and then 7 weeks after I started Ray, the pandemic began. So I'm got my head down. I have a lot of work to do, and then this summer of 2020 begins to unfold with the killings of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. And I really started thinking there's a unique moment in our country's history happening right now. And I want to figure out how to use my voice, my experience, my perspective to respond to this call for racial justice and the well-being of Black folks. And I was literally sitting on my front porch after working out one day, and I came across the hashtag Black Joy is Revolutionary. And I started following similar hashtags, and it literally hit me in a moment to write a book called Thriving While Black. And I wanted to capture stories of Black folks, because I think during this time we were also inundated with images and stories of Black people suffering at the hands of police and others. And I thought, I know some other stories that the world needs to hear right now. That's how I came up with the idea. And I was just sharing with you, a few months into it, I found out that someone else published a book with the same title. Wow. And so I put that spin on it, The Joy of Thriving While Black.
Oh, that is awesome. And it is good to be joyful, right? It is,
yeah.
It is good. I think a lot of the pathology of our people is it feeds on itself, right? As you get that, you start to get into negativity, you start to feel hopelessness, and it begins to feed on itself. So that the more you focus on something, the more you focus on your environment and where you are, the more that grows, as opposed to focusing on where you want to go. So. But yeah, I want to ask you a question. So one of the things that has always struck me about our community, particularly in networking, as we talk about networking, is just an inability. And again, it kind of goes back to, I think, the theme of what you're talking about, this inability for folks in our community to network well with folks in other communities, right? To build outside of our community, right? And maximize resources and leverage opportunities that are not in the hood. What do you think are some of the blockers, and why we suffer with that?
Yeah, I think if I had to boil it down to one thing, it would be opportunity and exposure. So I think you mentioned something earlier that I want to pick up on, and that is the idea of mindsets.
Yes.
So, a fixed mindset is one that says, based on my history and experience and what I've seen so far, like, all of the stuff that has happened in my past determines what is possible in my future.
Mm.
Whereas a growth mindset acknowledges that skills can be acquired, learned, just because I always tell the story of like how I had a fixed math mindset about my math ability. You get one bad math grade and it's like, I'm terrible at math, and you think that's permanent. So I think the whole idea of having a growth mindset, it's kind of, there are things that are circumstantial that can have an impact on our future. And I want to say that I'm speaking about this from a relatively privileged perspective, right? I have two parents who graduated from college. I have grandparents who graduated from college. I had lots of exposure to worlds outside of the one I grew up on the south side of Chicago. My parents had that exposure. So I was raised to not be as fearful of difference as other folks. I grew up far south side of Chicago, but I went to an elementary school in Hyde Park in Chicago that was very diverse. So I think I share that to say I'm not so special and unique in that I just had these revelations all by myself. I woke up one day and said, "Oh, I've had limiting beliefs. Let me overcome them." So I think it's really incumbent upon us to kind of reach back to our family and friends and our communities that don't have that same exposure to help young people along, to also not be as fearful of difference, such that we feel comfortable building our networks outside of the Black community. Because let's face it, we're 14% of the American population. It is going to be very, very difficult for us to thrive, which I define in my book, without having networks, collaborations, and inputs from folks from lots of different backgrounds.
Yeah, no, you're spot on with that. I think that is going to be critical to our success, to be able to learn how to connect with people, to break out of our boundaries, because I think, everything you have in life, and actually I know this, everything you have in life comes through people.
Absolutely.
And if you want to change the things that you have in your life, sometimes you have to change the people, right? Because people aren't always going to come with you, right? You can't take, there was a rapper recently. He said, you got to change your circle. Everybody can't go. Basically, that was the thesis of his song, is that as you're changing your life, as you improve yourself, you improve your condition. Part of it is you have to change your circle. And I think that's a lesson that we particularly in our community deal with, right? Because we focus a lot on the day ones, right? On being loyal to the hood, and not understanding that we don't own the hood, right? And so we have to kind of think about other ways and expanding. But I think it is incumbent. That's a great point you made. That it's incumbent on us to help that, facilitate that on folks who have had the privilege to see the world and see other things to give back.
Yeah, I want to say one other thing, Ray. I think it's so easy. A picture is painted of African Americans, often that is one of pathology. Mm-hmm. And I want to push back against that narrative. I think we have a normal human response to trauma.
Yes. Yes.
Fear is designed to keep us safe. Yes. And so the whole idea of is like that I need to like keep like circle the wagons really tight so I can be safe is a normal response to racism, discrimination. Look, if I went into another neighborhood, I might get beat down. There was redlining to keep me from moving outside of my circle and staying within mine. So there are some systemic barriers that we're overcoming. But still, the only way to overcome them is to continue to take micro steps to move toward mindsets and ways of being that serve us better. And we can help each other do that.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on with that, because I also push back against this kind of idea of, the blaming the victim. I guess it's easy to blame the victim and say because of where people are born, they can't do better. But I think that's totally, well, that's racism in a nutshell, right? That's really microaggression in a nutshell, where there's this assumption that the pathology is kind of part of who you are, but
part of the culture, right,
but it's a response to the resources. This is a response to, it's a fear response.
Absolutely.
Francis Cress Welsing, spoke about that a long time ago, how this is actually kind of passed down through DNA,
absolutely. Trauma, right? Historical trauma
through DNA. And we're finding out a lot about that scientifically now. I think a lot of, the science is actually proving that trauma is passed, through generations, and affects how entire communities live and breathe and react to stimulus. So, so this is fascinating work. So, so tell me a little bit more. I know, in your coaching practice, how do you address, this connectivity, this, networking, building a network? What's your platform for doing that?
Yeah. So there's so many ways I can come at that. And I actually talk about the idea of limiting beliefs, growth, and fixed mindset in my book. But, there is a very simple kind of questioning framework that I think is the kind of foundation of many different coaching programs and methodologies. And that is to ask a client, where are you now? Where do you want to be? And the where do you want to be is very powerful, because some folks haven't actually taken the time to map out a very powerful future vision for themselves, because they get stuck in the how do I get there? Yes. And that limits even the dreaming, right? So where are you now? Where do you want to be? What's getting in the way? And then what steps can you take to close the gap between where you are and where you want to be? And that could mean a lot of different things. Something as small as making a phone call, doing some research. You want to get in better shape. It's like working out one time next week, right? If you're starting at zero, as opposed to being next week, I'm going to work out every day. But then there's another question that I've learned to be really intentional with my clients, asking, and that is, who can support you? Who can help you? Yes. Think about friends, family members, coworkers, former coworkers, bosses, because oftentimes when we're stuck and we're really hurting, this feeling of I'm alone in this is very present. And if we really take time to map out who's in our network, forget about how long it's been since you've talked to them. Let's get it on paper. And then let's map out a plan for building support for your hopes and dreams and goals. And taking that step intentionally can really, really help us move forward. And there's sometimes, and I think this is a fear and trauma response, well, I don't want to tell too many people because I don't want to jinx myself, or what if I don't succeed, or what if someone takes my idea? Yeah. And it's I encourage people to think the opposite. Imagine that the whole universe, right? As Paulo Coelho would say in The Alchemist, imagine that the whole universe is actually conspiring to help you. That will shift your thinking about who and when and how to engage people in support of your dreams.
Oh man, that is so powerful. That is so powerful. And it's funny because it seems so simple, but simultaneously it seems so hard for people to do, right?
Yeah.
as put on your life coach hat for a second, and how would you address somebody like, because many of my clients come to me and and they struggle in this area and they blame it on, oh, I'm an introvert or I'm shy, I just like, I'm in my shell. What would you tell someone, or how would you help someone to kind of break out of that?
Yeah, so such a great question, Ray. I would, again, it's like once we have the whole purpose of us getting that crystal clear future vision out on paper, and let's
Mm-hmm.
say it's someone's dream career.
Yes.
What are you doing every morning? How are you spending your time? Who are you with? How are you feeling? All of that. It's like, how much are you making? Then we have to acknowledge that that is our future vision because we're not there now.
Mm.
And to get there, we might have to do some things that feel a little uncomfortable. So as we're talking, I keep drawing them back to the vision. Remember, this is where we're going. We got to do some things different. We got to do some things that are uncomfortable. Another thing that can be really helpful is to think about other people who have done something similar.
Mm.
And no matter who that person is, they haven't done that thing alone. So we don't need you to be different than you are. You can be shy. You can be introverted. That's fine. Think about the people you know who have done something similar to what you want to achieve. And people that you know, let's imagine how they might support you. Let's imagine a question you might ask them. Maybe we dip our toe in. We do it in writing first, right? I'm not going to, first of all, as a coach, I don't give any advice. Let me just say that.
Okay, good, good.
But I would never advise anyone, even if I wasn't wearing my coaching hat, who felt very introverted or shy, to plop themselves in the middle of a ballroom with 500 people as a first step. I work with my client to scale things back so that we can create a doable slam dunk step within the next couple weeks. And then we work those muscles. We work the muscles week in and week out to build a network in a way that feels comfortable. And then that expands our comfort zone little by little, every step we take.
Oh my God. That woo. You should be a life coach. You really should. That's some powerful stuff you put down over there. Like, wow. So but let me ask you this. So how has networking, as you're launching your book and building your practice, how has it helped you, or how any takeaways from you in the power of networking and where you're going with your life and career?
Yeah. So let me start by saying this. I am very extroverted. I am very gregarious. I can talk to anybody, anywhere. And it's still challenging for me sometimes. So I don't want to paint a picture like this is all super easy. And let me tell you why. So before I became a full-time coach, I worked in the nonprofit sector. And in the last 10, 12 years, I was in senior roles like executive director, president, CEO, managing director. And I had to build boards, build communities of volunteers, ask people to do things all the time, give money, give my organization a big contract. But somehow that felt easier because I wasn't the mission. The mission was to help kids go to college who might not otherwise have the opportunity, right?
Sure.
There was a cause that I was selling that was so powerful that my own personal ego wasn't very tied up into it. It was pretty easy to get people on board with that. Well, when I started my own business, it's like I'm building a network for me. And so I had to really dig deep and reach back into relationships where people hadn't heard from me for a while and say, hey, Remember me? It's Charisse from, Posse or I Mentor. And now I'm building this new thing. And it felt really challenging, but I really continued to leverage that goodwill that I built in all those other endeavors to bring people along. And, I learned this adage when I was working for nonprofits, which was, if you want people to give you money, ask them for advice. If you ask people for advice, then they'll give you money.
Interesting.
And I very sincerely asked people for advice along the way in my business, every step of the way, because I really wanted their advice. And people feel really good when they're brought along in your process, which was the whole kind of premise behind the book Presale Campaign, which I'd love to talk about. And then it's pretty easy for people to then think about like referring clients to you or buying your book or giving you speaking engagements because they feel like they've been a part of the journey and you didn't just like kind of reach out of the blue and say, hey, there's something I want you to do for me. Can you do it tomorrow?
That's awesome. So you mentioned your pre-sale campaign. And so, I mean, how did that look? And any advice you can give me on pre-selling my next book?
Yes. And actually, there was another thing that I want to share related to the last point, and I'll go into that. So there is a quote from Maya Angelou, and I included it in my book. So my book has like 10 chapters with 10 different themes, and there's questions to explore at the end of every chapter. And Maya Angelou says, people will forget the things that you say and things that you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. So I think being intentional about helping people feel good based on any interaction they have with you goes a long way. So in terms of the book presale campaign, that ties in. So I wrote my book through a program called the Creator Institute. So I want to give them a shout out. They coach people towards writing their book from idea to publication in 10 months. Very, very powerful, highly successful. And so just to give you a sense of the timeline, I began the book in June of 2020, and I had to have a first draft in by October of 2020. Very aggressive time frame. At that point, we paused and we worked on our pre-sale campaign. And what that meant was we were raising money to support the cost of publishing. So my goal was $8,000 to help me produce soft cover, hard cover, and audiobook. And our promise to those people who supported our pre-sale campaign was that they would get various perks, including signed copies of the book when it was published in April of 2021. But we promised to engage them in what we called was an author community along the way, sharing progress on word count, sharing cover ideas. It was my author community that helped me find my new title after someone else took Thriving While Black, getting input on various chapters of the book, giving input on the cover design. So by the time the book was published in April, those folks felt very invested in the success of the book. I brought people together. So 180 something people supported my pre-sale campaign. I exceeded my goal of $8,000 and raised $9,600. They wanted to see me succeed in all the ways. So I laid out my vision for what success would be. I invited 180 people to a Zoom meeting to give me advice, Ray, and 60 people showed up.
Whoa.
I put them in breakout rooms, gave them assignments, like what do I need to do in the first 30 days? Bottom line, there is a reason why social media and this like reality TV kind of phenomenon is blowing up. People love to look behind the curtain on any process, and people really, really enjoy giving advice. And I leveraged those two things to create a really powerful book launch and some really exciting kind of experiences and opportunities coming off of that.
That is awesome. Wow. So good stuff, Charisse. Well, let me ask you this. How can my audience help you? How can we serve you and for what you're trying to do next and the problems you're trying to solve in the world or with your business or how to help you grow?
Yeah, so there are a few areas. Like I am definitely excited to share the stories and the messages and the tools for really the last chapter of the book is about coaching yourself of the joy of thriving while Black. So think of me when you're planning your next conference, your next employee resource group gathering, workshop, or retreat as a speaker or workshop facilitator. I am launching a group coaching program based on the book. So the best ways, I'm actually full with one-on-one coaching clients right now, which is amazing, but I'll probably be taking more in the second quarter of 2022. So I would say, stay in touch with me, follow me on social media, and I can give you all those tags and join my mailing list. And that way you can find out about all my workshops, all my offerings, and all the ways that I can serve you.
That is awesome, Charisse. Well, this has been a pleasure. So thankful that you were able to join us today and share with us all the wonderful stuff you're talking about and all the good work that you're doing in the community and really worldwide. I think your message resonates around the world. So this has been great. And thanks again. And look forward to talking to you soon. Go ahead.
Can I share my contact information
Yeah,
quickly?
please.
Yeah, it's hello at Charisse M as in Michelle Williams.com. So if you put in Charisse M Williams, you can find me everywhere. LinkedIn, Instagram, but I'd love to stay in touch.
That's awesome, and I'll put all the links in the description, so yeah, people will be able to click and get to you quickly. All
Thanks,
right,
Ray.
thanks again.